Laser cut coasters, some pretty cool options. So laser cut coasters are actually pretty fun to make. I know it might not seem like the most exciting project, but it is actually pretty cool. It's a great beginner project to get to know your machine. This video, it's gonna go through lots of tips and tricks for all the different types of machines. We'll showcase primarily cutting in this video, a little bit of engraving, but it's mostly about the cutting, whether it's layered, messing around with a lot of different materials, solid woods, veneers, plywood, acrylic, cork, paint, stains, finish, lots of good stuff here. You of course can use the timestamps to skip on around, but here you have it, laser cut coasters. So in this video, we're gonna explore a lot of different options. Obviously, just the solid wood where you can just cut it out. This one right here is actually some sapele mahogany veneer. We'll talk about that. Some where you're actually cutting out solid wood. And some lasers can cut out the solid wood like so. Pretty cool. You know, these are the most basic ones. I'm not gonna spend too much time, like any laser can do this. Any diode, you got a 10-watt diode, it can cut some basswood, you can engrave it. Pretty basic. There's some fun designs. We'll talk more about designs later in the video. Some other fun ones, you know, you can see here we got the layered effect. We'll talk about some considerations with what materials, what actually makes for a good coaster, right? You want this to be something, if you're gonna sell it, that can actually be used and it can handle the wear and tear and condensation and heat and all that good stuff. We'll talk about some tips with paint, with attaching these to get them really intricate. And then we're gonna explore some cork. Actually, and some other designs here. So lots in here. We got a little bit of holders and some other considerations. So here we go. So to start off, we're going to just do a basic coaster here showing a single piece. Pretty straightforward, right? You cut your wood, you cut your material, whatever that might be. We'll go over quite a few materials. You can see here there is some masking on, and we'll talk about some considerations when to mask, when not to. But here, just looking at these little honeycomb bees that also have these little pieces for a stand. Now, this was some actual hardwood veneer, so it's plywood. And so even though the machine does a really good job, sometimes there are some burn marks if you don't have a masking on. And so I always like to sand. I prefer, if it's real hardwood, to not mask, and then I can lightly sand after the fact. This sander, you know, you'll see me use it a couple times. It's just really nice because of those foam pads. It's not too aggressive. It's not going to sand right through the veneer. But if you're going to work with real hardwoods, that's certainly something you're going to have to consider. Now, this particular file, it came with, you know, just a really basic little stand. You can just layer it up with some CA glue, and then that accelerator, that activator, glues it up real quick. But you can see some beautiful hardwoods, right? So some hardwood veneer, and then we can add some finish after the fact to make everything pop. And so it's a pretty basic one. We'll explore a lot more design files later. Now here I'm just using like a furniture butter. You could certainly do a lacquer finish or a spray lacquer. I love using that, but I'll show this a little bit later with some hardwoods. I just love this one. I'll link it down below. So many finish options, but this is an easy one. It's really easy for reapplication, and I think it works really well for this. And so just a little bit of wax in it to make it pop, some oils, all good stuff, and you know, a pretty thin. This is like 1/8 inch. It still works for coasters. It's a step up from the basic basswood ones you saw at the beginning that are engraved. So it kind of makes your project stand out a little bit more. You can see that pop of walnut. Then there's some black limba there, or zebra wood. So pretty simple stand, but a great simple option to get started with coasters. So we're actually going to slow down before others, and I want to talk about the materials and what makes for a good coaster that you can actually use. Now, a lot of common coasters, cork, right? Cork is a very common coaster material, really cheap ones. Well, some lasers, you can actually cut out the shapes, and you can do, you know, this layered effect here, where maybe if I'm doing one of these like topographic maps, it's not as strong here, but I can put another substrate Behind, got some cool effects here. You of course could cut out different shapes, but we're not going to get into the engraving so much here, mostly talking about cutting. So really quick, I want to show you one machine that can actually cut cork and what you can do with that. Now this isn't meant to be an ad at all. This is the xtool F2 Ultra UV laser. But I'm showing this because cork is considered, right? That's what we use for a lot of coasters. Well, this machine, because it's a UV laser, it does cold processing, so it can cut through this really clean, but it doesn't burn it. Now, obviously, if you went really slow with high settings, you could get it to burn, as you see with this engraving, but you can get sheets of cork and then cut it out. Repeated passes, you can kind of see what's going on here, but play around with the settings. You can get some really, really cool results with cork. And so here we have, kind of like a outline of a lake. You could go full topographic and do layers if you wanted, like obviously with signs, but here, get a local lake, throw down the shape, the outline, a couple other parts. After the fact, you are going to have to very carefully pop everything out using an X-Acto knife. Make sure you don't bend so you can kind of preserve the integrity of the cork. Since I was already using this machine, I thought I would just jump on and show. Here I'm using some of that walnut from earlier, that walnut plywood. I have a double stick adhesive on the back already. Still need to pop that out. And so if you use a galvo laser like this, notice there's that angle. So it does cut at a bit of an angle. But again, you'll just have to pop this out. But you see there's that double stick adhesive on the back. That makes things really easy for application. Holds really well. All right, now I'm not doing an ad, but I will say this is the machine over the last couple years, my favorite machine, and the most I've ever reviewed any machine is this F2 Ultra UV. Everything you see here, plastics, leathers, glass, inner glass, but wood engraving, wood cutting, amazing, and it can do cork. So if you want to, definitely check out this video. This machine is ridiculous, and I really showcased a lot of the things it could do. It was pretty blown away, but just wanted to give that a little shout out. So you can check that one really, really in depth. Now, for these little lake coasters, the lake I'm talking about is Diablo Lake, and it actually has these turquoise waters. So I'm going to cut some acrylic. Now, I have to use a CO2 laser for certain colors of blue, for mirrored acrylic, clear acrylic. So I'm over at the P3. You'll need a CO2 laser if you want to do the acrylic. For mirrored acrylic like this, I definitely will recommend masking it, no matter how good your laser is. It just gets all cloudy, and so, I mean, that's so bright, so beautiful. So kind of fun to play around. Like earlier, again, you're gonna have to do a little bit of sanding. It just depends on how you do it. But if I'm gonna do engraving on the piece, then I'm not gonna mask it. And so then just a little bit of light sanding, and then put it together, and it just pops. The color is just so cool. So you can play around with all the colors. Obviously, you could do a backer where you paint it. It could do a lot of different things, but this just gives you some ideas of a different design that you could do for local rivers, local lakes. Here I have already added finish to the walnut pieces, and now I'm applying everything together. Definitely want to do the finish beforehand. But here you can see what they look like. I think the cork is kind of fun, and the cork is going to absorb any moisture. Obviously, it's going to be fine with the heat. I think that's a fun design, a fun project that you could do with cork, and that opens up a new possibility with that UV laser application. So you can see I could mess around with my settings a little bit more to get it clean, but those inner cuts were really clean. And here's just a look at what it looks like with that walnut plywood. You can see if you sand a little too much, it goes through that veneer, so you got to be careful. But I don't know, maybe go for a rustic look. But as far as sales, I think this is a fantastic idea. This was just a screenshot of something I saw online, someone selling them. But you can see here, you can go even more basic, just use some basswood toppers and a basic backer. But some sales ideas here, some potential. All right, so we cut some cork, great. Now let's talk about wood, right? Another material that's great for coasters is just solid wood. If I took this piece of, I think this is hemlock or some fir, right? One of those softwoods, pines, and I have the shape. If I put my hot beverage on here, it might discolor at some point, but it's not gonna melt it. It's gonna scuff it up maybe a bit. There's some different lacquers I can put on there. It's gonna absorb, right? Sometimes you want a coaster to absorb that moisture. Sometimes You don't care as much, but wood is pretty forgiving if it's solid wood. Now, some machines, especially lasers, they can't cut the thick solid wood. Most of your diode machines, even like a 40 watt or bigger diode machine, it's not gonna be able to cut through. There's one laser that I've been using. It's a CO2 laser, the P3. We can cut through 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch. You wouldn't want a coaster that thick, but you can cut through solid wood, some solid ash, some cherry here, some other wood. So if you want to do the solid wood, which is a really, really nice look, and it's kind of a premium price point, you can consider something like the P3 or a CO2 laser. We'll talk more about lasers later, but that's one consideration for the solid wood. You, of course, can do cool outlines for states. Got some nice white oak here. It's about a 1/4 inch right here. I'll even link down where you can find some of these hardwoods. Obviously, I have a lot of really cool hardwoods in here, but most folks with lasers, they don't have the woodworking tools to mill up their own wood. So there is a great source. It's not sponsored at all. It's just where I got it, where you can get some good hardwoods for that good thin thickness that even at a 1/4 inch, you might be able to pull it off with a machine like the P2S from xtool or other CO2 lasers. The P3 is amazing. So let's explore the solid wood a little bit more. So this is definitely my favorite, cutting solid hardwood. There is no filler, there's no MDF, it's not plywood, it is solid wood. This is some awesome white oak. You can get some really, really cool ones. Again, I'll link down below where I got these. Here's some cherry. This machine can cut a lot thicker of solid woods, but we're talking coasters, so you don't want to go too crazy thick, but lots of possibilities there. Here, I had already cut these out on the P3, these little NES cartridges, and then I went over to the F2 UV because it engraves so clean and so crisp. And then I did some scoring passes. Well, guess what? The scoring passes, I did it a couple times because I tried to make it darker, unintentionally, just getting a couple lines, and just 3 passes of the scoring, it cut through. It cut through this wood. Now, this wood was probably, it's definitely a softer wood. So you can even cut some solid hardwood on that F2 UV. I was pretty blown away and I just got cleaner results. So yeah, I went ahead and just did all of these NES cartridge style things over here on the F2 UV. Just kind of, I engraved it first and then I could cut it out right there. Pretty simple, pretty easy. I think this is a really fun idea. Obviously, you're not going to sell these if you're using, Nintendo or things like that. But engraving, wow, crazy colors. We're not doing a lot of engraving in this video. Actually, this is really the only engraving is on this project. This is really showing cutting. But I went ahead and showed you right here. These were my settings. So you can just take a screen grab and look at how I did the settings. If you have the F2 Ultra UV, just save you some time. Everything else is pretty straightforward. Some test files you'll get going. But I also did this with states. I think this would be a great idea. Do some state outlines. A lot of great files out there for this. So definitely another sales idea, something very local. So here's that furniture butter. I just love using this stuff for wood. It's just simple. It goes on easy. It's natural. Here, got some other projects. Have some coasters that are puzzle pieces. So have some solid ash put together. You saw those bumblebee hexagons earlier. But here, you just apply that finish, let it soak in. I definitely would recommend like a wax or oil finish for solid wood. The other ones, I think a spray lacquer is fine and is great. But here you can see this is some solid ash. Obviously, this one was thicker, so I cut this on the P3. Did a thicker cherry piece right here. Again, these are coasters, so I don't want to go crazy thick. But some possibilities. I think the solid wood is a really clean look. If you try to do this on the CNC, it would be kind of a nightmare to pull it off. So the lasers are the way. I did do a whole video on the P2S, which is a 55 watt laser, CO2 laser, if you want to see some tips on hardwoods. But this P3 can cut through everything you see here. 3/4 inch cherry, it's doing 1/2 inch walnut, thick plywood. I had so much fun, as a woodworker, being able to cut solid wood. And so obviously, you can check out this video to learn more. I'm not trying to plug, but here's some ideas. Okay, so we got layers. So 2 different pieces layered together. We'll show you some tips on gluing it or some adhesive. But one thing to consider with that top material, so whatever you choose for your material, there's some really cool materials that aren't gonna work well with heat. So if you have like a hot, cup of coffee, if you got a teacup that goes on it, after a while it's just going to peel off that veneer. And so one material that I've loved working with is something like this. So this looks like walnut, but it's actually a faux walnut. It's just MDF with a veneer. So for your top piece, whatever is going to come in contact with the heat, I don't recommend having an MDF of any color on the top. MDF, it's always going to be a really thin one. It's going to peel off. Now there are some, obviously this is a veneer. This was like plywood. It's not MDF, but that veneer is a little bit more solid. It's not going to peel off. Whereas I think a lot of these, which I love this material, this isn't going to be the best for your top layer. So instead, what you can do is you can use this one right here, some other materials. This is like some solid maple that's already pre-finished that I have. Some other ones we got. This is that sapele mahogany. It's a top one, but it's plywood. It's a little bit more sturdy. So before you cut everything and you go crazy, you don't want to make a bunch of coasters, especially if you're going to sell them and people use them and then they just peel off right away. So you definitely want to do some tests on your materials that you have. Just see, can that top piece handle it? If you want to do some of those cool veneered ones. You could do, I didn't do any acrylic on the top, right? This is acrylic, the plastic. You could, just think about heat. I think that would work fine. It just depends on, just take that into consideration. You can see here, we definitely, we have some of that wood again. That's a great topper. All these ones that have color on the top, this was just basswood plywood, and I did paint it. Now again, with the paint, you're gonna have to consider, we're gonna add the colors to paint, but then we're gonna add a top coat just to hold that in. I do recommend testing to see how many top coats. Probably 2 top coats. Do a coat, let it cure, do another one. 2 top coats would be good. So as you get condensation from your dripping drink, or you get, heat, it's not gonna, peel this off and it's like a one-time use type situation. So with all of these look beautiful. They're awesome. They make for a great thumbnail, don't they? But you wanna make sure if you're gonna make these as gifts, if you're gonna make these as sales, that you really do consider what material is coming in contact with the drinking vessel. So something to consider. Well, let's jump into these layered ones and kind of talk about some material options, some tips and tricks for you. So right here, just showing when you're using the nicer woods, if it's a veneer, you don't want to lose it. You definitely want to have a piece of masking. And so you want to apply the masking to both sides. It just makes it cleaner. And so any piece that's already pre-finished, you definitely want to do that. Now, if you're going to just paint it later, then you don't need to do that. Here's an older video just showing the process. I'm doing the double stick adhesive. I like the 3M 300 LSE. That's really top end, higher end. You saw that new brand I tried earlier. Those are great. But then just doing some, masking like this is really simple. Just a quick little DIY little kit like that to apply it. You can see all of that is MDF that I did for a big game board project. But get my kids involved. Here we're doing it on some nicer hardwood veneer. So adding that masking ahead of time, and then afterwards, yeah, my kid was, I think he was 3.5 at this point. Get the whole family involved, right? We're making game board pieces, and this Settlers of Catan game is actually kind of like coasters. If you're looking for a ton of tips, even if you could care less about board games, this video is not trying to sell you stuff. It's just giving a ton of laser cutting tips. Lots of tips galore in this one. This was a really big endeavor, a really fun project, but lots of tips in this that are similar to kind of the coaster land. Obviously ornaments, my best selling item. Some more ideas for ornaments, quite a few videos like that as well, but lots of tips there. So here we're cutting, you can see the masking is already on. So my backer, if it's got that MDF, I don't want that to come in contact with the water. So that's gonna be my bottom layer. So I use the masking. Here, this is just basswood that I'm gonna end up painting. So I already have that double stick adhesive on the bottom side, but I don't need to mask the top because I'm just gonna paint it. Or you could do stain, you could certainly do staining. That is another option. I showed that a lot more in that Settlers of Catan or Catan video. You can check that out. But here you can see just simple basswood. It does have its place if you add in some colors and some other things. And so here are the projects. And so I kind of just played around. save those Amazon boxes, right? Bring them out. Obviously, making sure that you got the right temperatures. It was pretty cold where I'm at. So I did a couple layers and then I had to bring everything in for it to fully cure inside the garage. But vent that, or actually use a respirator. But I still do rattle cans. I just think it's easier. And then I just throw down a couple coats of clear lacquer after the fact. I'm not too picky when it comes to painted projects. If it's wood, I always love my Deft spray lacquer. I'll link that one down below. That's my favorite spray lacquer. But here's all these different colors, and then you can kind of, then I took the masking off these pieces that had the veneer, and so I could kind of see which one matched with one, and then I just peeled off that double stick adhesive and just layered them up so easily, and you can see them coming together, right? So there's that double stick adhesive, and we just pulled it off, and you get some cool colors, some cool combos. I think these are really fun. You just definitely need to consider which type of material is going to be on your top layer that comes in contact. But some ideas here. So you can do color. You can add a splash of color. Totally fine. Here's that veneered MDF, which I wouldn't have on the top. Got that lacquer coated color on top. This is another material a lot of people like to use. It's just called True Flat. And now it's still faux veneer. It's not, but this one I think can hold up a lot more. You don't have to mask it. You can just rub it off after the fact. So that actually works really well. So I know we kind of referenced this earlier, but I do want to show, up close and personal these examples so it's a little bit easier to see. If you don't need a closer look at materials, just use the timestamps to skip on ahead. But I referenced the MDF materials like this. So this is beautiful stuff. It's great for signs. It's MDF core, but it's that, laminate on the top. So it's just a faux. Any kind of condensation on here, it's going to peel off. So this would not be a good topper. I use these as backers a lot, as opposed to solid wood plywood. So this is a faux walnut. Well, this is real walnut. You can see this is real walnut wood veneer. It's adhered to plywood. And then after you cut it, you might do some sanding, some babinga, and then you can add your finish after the fact. Here's another option. This is actually solid wood, solid veneer on top of MDF. Now I said don't do the MDF. Well, it's as long as it's a solid, a real veneer. So this is real wood on top, real wood, real wood. So this is the faux veneer. This is real walnut veneer. And so if it's real wood topper, the veneer on the top with that, whether it's pre-finished or not pre-finished, I think that's a great topper for your coaster if you're gonna do 2 layers that comes in contact. So I'll link these. I show these in a lot of my videos. These are great options. And then of course the solid wood. So the one I talked about earlier, I'll talk about that. They come with these, thinner pieces that are a little bit more laser friendly. So check out those links for a little bit more on that. So normally I would do a little bit of a software tutorial, but really this one's really straightforward. You get your files from wherever. Some are scoring, some are engraving. So if you really need the tutorials for XCS, it's super easy. I have it in a lot of my other videos. Some of those other videos I referenced, pretty simple. But these designs, these files. Now obviously this is IP, right? I'm not going to make money selling Nintendo or other things. This would be just a personal project. So if you're going to do this kind of thing, don't sell that. They're going to come after you. So don't do that. But there are some great sources of files. So a lot of these you saw in the video, especially this one. So in all my videos, especially my laser videos, I talk about this this place, right? This is Creative Fabrica. And so normally to get these cool files, you have to pay, a couple bucks. So if I go to Etsy or some of the other design sites, $2 to $3 for this, $2 to $3 for this. Well, Creative Fabrica is unlimited downloads for $4 a month. If you use the link down below, you get 10 free downloads. So, just check out all of these different coaster. You can do maps as well if you really want to get into the different, topographic maps, some other cool ones. So check that out. There's so many other things, not just coasters. And if you're doing coasters, you could search ornaments or signs. It kind of has that same effect because they're very similar with the layers. But these, A lot of these come with, plans and the files to build little cases and stands. You can get really creative. Obviously, sports, you could do sports teams. If you're not selling it, you could do, professional sports logos. But if you're trying to make money, there's a lot of different ideas. And so, like I showed earlier, I really do think, something for your region makes sense for sales. These maps, like you saw earlier with that lake, I think that's a great idea. Or just something that's really, a jumble of words together that makes sense for where you're at. But again, Creative Fabrica, it's $4 a month. Can bundle for more, and that's usually the cost of 1 or 2 files, but it's unlimited downloads. Of course, there's so many other cool things. There's fonts galore. They have their own AI tools, a ton, but you can get all these different fonts and then just download them, easy to use in XCS. So it's awesome. Definitely check that link down below for Creative Fabrica for some other cool files and some inspiration. But possibilities galore. It's so fun to be creative, and these lasers just enable you to do so many cool things. And just hopefully this is giving you some ideas, some inspiration for projects, some tips and tricks along the way. Coasters, underrated, but pretty cool. So many more projects, so many more ways you could go with this. Hopefully that, design and the software, Creative Fabrica, gave you some more ideas, a lot more to see there, especially with the holders. Just limitless possibilities. So if there is something that you were still hoping to see as far as laser cut coasters questions, drop it in the comments. I am going to have an upcoming video more on coasters with engraving, with all the different material types, some really cool stuff. I know it doesn't seem as exciting, but some really cool things with that. So maybe I can incorporate a little bit more cutting tips and whatnot into that video. So drop it in the comments for that. If this video added value, please consider subscribing. We do a lot of laser content on this channel. Woodwork, some solid wood here, but a lot more other woodwork. Other machines, maker tools. Sometimes there is a little bit of product review. You saw those different machines there. And if you want to learn more about those machines, I got full videos on them, full reviews. If you do end up wanting to make a purchase, you can use our affiliate link here or down below. At least just check out the machine, get to know the specs and kind of compare it. You can see my full video comparing all of these different lasers. It's a really in-depth look at all the projects I've been able to make and see what's the best fit for you. But if you do end up making a purchase, purchasing through that affiliate link, my family, we get a small commission, helps support us and how I'm able to make these videos. So consider that. Also a little more discount if you use that code. But anyway, pretty cool stuff. Hopefully it did help. Well, thank you for watching. Take care. Until next time.